Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. We have passed the half-century mark. It's like Ricky Ponting on Boxing Day. How are you feeling?
It is like Ricky Ponting on Boxing Day, and hopefully we can eventually get to Michael Clark, Sydney Test match, SCG, circa, I'm going to say 2018, 2019.
I think he was gone by then, Michael Clark. He was retired, I think. I'm pretty sure he was gone by then.
Could have been earlier. It was that match where he had the 327 or 26, if I'm not mistaken, not out knock with an unnamed, unbranded bat. Do you remember that?
No, mate, I'll be honest. I know he scored an outrageous amount of runs. I just don't remember the circa.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. But anyways, how have you been?
I've been good, mate. I've been great. It's been a big weekend the past weekend. Celebrated my 24th birthday, and you were there. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it? It
was great.
We had an epic time together. We enjoyed with our closest mates around us, and it was nice to celebrate it alongside our good friend Sterling Ellis. Shout out Sterling as well. And it was just everything you'd want from a birthday celebration. Just lots of madness and badness, and enjoying a few drinks, or seven,
only a few,
or 12, or 25. No, it was good. Yeah, we truly did indulge, and as you should on a birthday, and doing it with your best mates is the best part about it. So it was a good weekend. Sunday was a little bit sloppy. Just enjoyed, slow roasting in the sun, which is, couldn't think of anything better to do on a nice sunny Sunday, and when you're feeling a little bit in the pits, but it's good. It's a new week. It's a fresh week, and we're ready to rock and roll. How have you been?
I've been good, man. I'll be honest. I was quite dusty yesterday. My dopamine receptors were all off the charts because of all the drinks we had the night before. And I had to keep reminding myself that life is actually okay. It's just the withdrawals. It's the hangovers. It's the Sunday scary. So
it's all within reason. It's all part of the balance, isn't it?
I had a good night's sleep.
Yep.
So, feeling up and at it. So today we're going to be speaking about fear of ending a relationship. The fear that comes with having to end a relationship that you might have to. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Ending a relationship, romantic or friendship, but more specifically, I think we'll be touching on that of the romantic sense today. It's something that I've gone through myself relatively recently, a few months ago, and you're no stranger to it either. And I think it's one that I would have really loved to have known a little bit more about at the time of when I was doing it. I had really good supportive friends around me, you being one of them at the time when, things were really difficult for me and in my relationship, and I wasn't in a good headspace, and I started to not really feel like myself. And it's something that I've really wanted to open up about and talk about for some time now. So I think this will give a lot of insight into when to know when you should walk away from someone and when it's no longer healthy for you and serving you. And hopefully this can provide some help and support to a lot of people and a lot of you guys that, you might be in a relationship or a friendship where you may be no longer feeling like yourself anymore, and things are just not working out for you the way they maybe once were, and that's okay. And hopefully this episode can give you a little bit more of maybe some confirmation or some help with your perspectives in terms of navigating this topic. So I think to start off with this episode, you got to be asking yourself, okay, you've been in a relationship and, things have hopefully been great, but, things now are maybe not feeling so great. Maybe they haven't felt so great for a while. You're having a rush of emotions, a rush of thoughts in your head. So you're going to be questioning how to know when you need to end a relationship.
And honestly, that's a podcast episode in itself. But let's say you're at the point now where you should do it. Your gut instinct is telling you that the best thing for you would be to end this relationship. And in the back of your mind that the only thing that's holding you back are, the sunk cost fallacy, the fear of feeling shit, and the fear that you might not actually find someone else. So you've already arrived at that point.
Well, yeah. So you mentioned sunk cost fallacy there, and that's a great one. For those who aren't aware of the sunk cost fallacy, what is it?
So it's the whole idea that when you've pursued and invested a lot of time and energy into something, it's much more difficult to withdraw that investment because of the time you have kind of accrued dedicating to it. And that's really commonly seen in relationships, where you ask a lot of people, like, you know, people who maybe have been in a 5-6 year relationship, which is, you know, like, oh, why do you love your partner? And they'll say, oh, well, I've been with them for 5-6 years. That's not the right response. You shouldn't be saying that. That's pretty much just alluding to the sunk cost fallacy, which is, yeah, well, the only reason I'm still with them is because, you know, I've spent so much time with them now, it's like it'd be a waste to throw it away. But in the context of a relationship, you should never, ever, ever fall into the sunk cost fallacy, because you're still trading up your happiness and all these other facets of life.
Yeah, and look, it might be 5, 6, 7 years spent together, but you know, if you're in a relationship, you want to be spending hopefully a lifetime together, and that's going to hopefully be more than 5, 6 years together, right? So yeah, it might be 5, 6 years together spent already, but think about the future amount of years that would be spent in the relationship where you're potentially not happy at all. And that would be detrimental to the both of you. And it would be selfish, and it would be really, and this is the reason why it's important to recognize when you need to end that relationship, because it's not just going to be of benefit for you, but it's probably also going to be of benefit for your partner. It's probably selfish of you to avoid the conversation and to avoid bringing it up. And even if that conversation means not necessarily ending with them, but just talking about where you're at. And that's an uncomfortable thing to do, but it's necessary for both you and your partner, because if it's on your mind, chances are that's giving off a vibe and an energy through your body language, through your actions with your partner. And look, if you know your partner well, which you would when you're dating them, you would realize when something's up. So they'd be feeling it just as much as you would.
Jeremy, how long were you dating your partner for?
Officially about half a year.
Half a year. So it's a decent amount of time. When did you know it was time to end it? When did you start getting those lingering thoughts? Because there are going to be listeners out there who are listening to this and thinking, like, I'm not sure whether I should end it. And I know we said it could probably be another podcast episode, but in your context, what were the signs for you?
I really just started not to feel like myself anymore. And that was something that I was really unfamiliar with. And that was scary for me.
What does that mean? Not feeling like yourself?
I'm a very enthusiastic person, very chilled, laid back person. I'm very excitable, big lover of life, big lover of people, want to be doing 1,000,001 things at once, head on a swivel. And that left me. And I felt none of that for probably a good few weeks before ending the relationship. And, you know, when I'm also a big believer that you shouldn't just end something when you first initially feel something. I'm a big believer that you should really give everything a red hot crack and try to work on stuff when it's not easy, when there are challenges. Because yes, there are going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be bumps along the way, and you need to work on those. But I was really firm in myself that I gave it a red hot crack for a good half a year and more, and really gave it everything I could. Really, really did. And when you reach a point of feeling a bit broken yourself and feeling like you're not maybe loved to the same extent that you have been putting your love and affection towards someone else, and the feelings of reciprocation aren't there, that sucks. And it can only go on for so long, and can only go on to a point where you're eventually going to reach the short end of the fuse, and you're going to feel pretty broken and ready to maybe consider walking away, which is totally okay, totally fine, and totally healthy for you, and probably for your partner as well, because it would be selfish of you to be with someone when you can no longer give them yourself wholeheartedly. And I couldn't feel like I could give myself wholeheartedly anymore, because like I said, I just felt like I wasn't able to be myself anymore. I lost my sense of self. I'm not an anxious person naturally, and anxiety is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And I feel like it needs to get thrown around with caution, because there's anxiety, clinically diagnosed anxiety, and then there's feelings of anxiety and feelings of being anxious. And that was something that I became quite familiar with, the feeling of being quite anxious, and feeling quite anxious on a consistent basis that I'd never felt before in my life. And that was through struggling to eat, struggling to do the things that I was really excited to normally do, which was going to gym, socializing with my friends, getting up and going on walks along the beach, like just the mundane things that were just habitual for me in my life. I felt like I just lost them. I had no drive and desire to do it anymore. And that was scary. And that left me feeling constantly like in a headspace where I was just clouded and fuzzy and couldn't concentrate on specific tasks and the things that I love doing. And my social battery was low. I wasn't able to, socialize with my friends to the same extent and with my family to the same extent. And, I was getting snappy and I was feeling like I was on eggshells a fair bit. And this is all recipe for something that is no longer healthy for you.
Thank you for sharing all of that with me. Like, you've gone to a very deep and vulnerable place. And if you wouldn't mind like sharing, you mentioned all the things that it made you feel like you didn't feel yourself. You lost pleasure in a lot of activities that you would usually find pleasurable. What were the kind of things in the relationship that your partner at the time was doing that made you feel that way, or rather what they weren't doing?
I think reciprocation and love is a big one. I think as guys, we are...
Forget us as guys. What was the actual example in your case?
Well, no, I think it links to this because I think as guys, we're very much told and taught to like be the giver, the provider in a way, show the love, show the appreciation, show the affection. And as you fucking should, like I'm a believer that you should as a guy, but I think we should also feel it mutually back, right? And as anyone should in a relationship, you should feel it back naturally. And I didn't feel like I was feeling it back naturally for quite some time. And that was really hard for me to deal with. I didn't feel like, the love that I was giving was being reciprocated towards me to the same extent. And that's tough because like people's love develops at different paces. So, I would never be critical of the person for not feeling like they could give the love that maybe I could give, but you would hope that it comes eventually, and you can only wait for so long. If you're in a relationship with someone for like half a year or longer and you're giving it everything and you're being the best boyfriend or girlfriend that you can be, and you're reaching that stage and you're not feeling like you're getting it to the same extent back, or just even to an extent that is like fulfilling your needs, because we've all got needs and boundaries in a relationship. And if it's not making you grow in the relationship and you're feeling like you're putting out and giving out and you're not feeling that love and affection back to an extent that fulfills you, that eventually just eats away at you. And then you start to question and self-doubt, well, what am I doing that's wrong? And all these intrusive thoughts start to enter your head. And yeah, so that's something that I was feeling in my relationship. And that was what led me to eventually feel like, okay, something needs to change here. And like, I know that I've given it my absolute all, and it's okay. Maybe this just isn't meant to be. And that is totally okay. But I had the confidence in knowing that I really gave it a red hot crack and gave it my absolute all.
It's interesting because in your case, something I noticed about you at the time, especially when you did end things, was that you never had this fear that you wouldn't find someone else. And I think a lot of people will stay in relationships that they know that they should end purely based on that fear that they won't find someone else. That if they end things here now, they're going to be in this depressed bubble and things won't get better. And I'm of the belief that that stems from you not having a high enough level of self-esteem, self-worth, and a level of self-respect. And I think what potentially made the breakup on your end a little bit easier was you never had those thoughts. I think for as long as I've known you, you've been the sort of person that's always been quite confident in himself, as you should be. But you've also been quite realistic and understand that if you are capable of loving one person, you're capable of loving someone else, which means that you're capable of ending this relationship and, one day being in a more deep and meaningful relationship with someone else and letting that love develop naturally. But I don't think you were ever fearful that, you'll never find someone else. And I think that's something that holds back a lot of people, especially when we're younger. And there's something I kind of want to share, which is there's this idea that God rewards those who take a leap of faith. For those who don't believe in God, you can kind of attach it to the universe, right? But the universe rewards those who take a leap of faith. And leaps of faith aren't meant to be comfortable. They're not meant to be necessarily fun. But what they are a test of your character and a test of your resilience, which is pretty much saying, I'm not sure what the outcome of this will be, but I understand it's the right outcome for me. And you see it in a lot of places, and not even specifically to relationships. People who will quit their 9 to 5 to go all in on their side hustle, and then you see that it becomes, a multi-million-dollar business, and that requires a leap of faith. You see it in a lot of relationships as well, where two people have been dating for 5, 6, 7 years. And a lot of people ask the man, because it's usually the man who proposes. In fact, it's always the man who proposes, as it should be. Why haven't you proposed to your girlfriend? And, they usually give a half-assed response like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 like, not ready for it, whatever. And then they'll end the relationship eventually because, it comes to that point of like, what's going to happen? Are we going to be serious or not? And then after they've had that actual leap of faith to end the relationship, albeit it should have been done earlier, they meet someone else and they get engaged quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that all is related to that idea that, once you do take that leap of faith, you tend to exhibit and accrue some sort of reward for it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why that is. But I think that it is a test of your character. And I think the universe does reward those people who take care of their self-worth and self-respect. But what does it say, Jeremy, for those people who are fearful of ending it because they are fearful they're not going to find someone else?
I think it just says that you're fearful of the unknown, and naturally we're fearful of the unknown as humans. We're creatures of habit, something we've spoken about a lot here. We are creatures of habit as humans. We like to know routine. We like to know what is happening for us day to day. We like to have comfort in our relationships, in our friends, in our loved ones. And if you're giving away or ending rather a relationship with someone that has been so dear to you, and if not one of the most dear people to you in your life, that is really, really fucking scary. And you've just ended something with someone that essentially knows everything about you, all of your imperfections, all of your little innuendos. They know everything about you. You've been your most vulnerable sense of self to them, and that's just gone. Everything is gone. That is fucking scary. That is terrifying, and that is completely fair. But it also gives a sense of you're fearful of the loneliness that comes after that, which is linked to the fear of the unknown, the fear of what happens now, what happens going forward. Am I going to find someone again? Am I going to find someone in the next month, in the next 3 months, in the next year? How long will it take? It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of loneliness. With that being said, though, I think, one, it's very, very good for you to feel that sort of way. You need to get comfortable feeling a bit lonely after something like this, when you've been with someone by your side for X amount of time, X amount of years. You essentially become quite codependent on one another, which is completely natural and completely fair. But the only way to rediscover, I guess, what is important to you, what are the values in a relationship that are important to you going forward, because there are going to be many, because this is why you've entered the relationship in the first place, because clearly there weren't values and there weren't things that were dear to you anymore. You need to be lonely and have a period of isolation to rediscover those thoughts, rediscover those values, know who you are again, know what you stand for. So rather than being fearful of that loneliness that is going to come afterwards, because it will come, you will have romantic loneliness afterwards. You might have, great support with your friends and family, but romantically, there will be some loneliness there. Be excited for it, because that is a great opportunity for you to actually rediscover those values like we've spoken about. Know what you want going forward, because it's all a lesson learned at the end of the day. And that's what gave me such comfort after, ending my relationship, because Yeah, there was fear of unknown. Yeah, there was like a sense of loneliness after. I've just been with someone for a period of time where, you're devoting yourself wholeheartedly to them. And it's scary for that to just be thrown away like that. But once I switched the mentality of, actually being excited to be on my own again and to work on myself again and to know what I want going forward and use that time to actually reflect on, okay, what was good about the relationship that I want to take forward into the next one and what wasn't good that is so important for me going into the next one, gave me so much comfort, gave me so much confidence about, the space that I was in now, and just allowed me to be really content with whatever happens now will happen in due course. And a time limit is the worst thing you can put on something. And I think, there are relationships out there where they've ended and then you see them get snapped up really, really quickly, or you hear that they are looking for something really, really quickly again, romantically. It's like, you know what, like to each their own, but it'll happen in due course and it'll be when it's meant to be. So just embrace the feeling of like loneliness or isolation. Great opportunity to work on yourself, and that vibe and that energy will actually just be seen by everyone around you. And that's a thing. And like people see that. People see when you're confident again and when you are like putting yourself out there and it's a sense of vibrance that can be seen very, very clearly. And so just allow that to take its time naturally.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. I'm going to challenge you on the loneliness aspect.
Sure.
Not that I don't think that loneliness... So I agree with the aspect that you need to get comfortable being lonely, but I wouldn't say lonely, because loneliness isn't necessarily a good thing. I would say, and maybe this sounds contradictory, but it's not, because loneliness is a separate thing. Become comfortable being in your own space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the real problem lies. You mentioned the whole idea of codependency, which is, you become so dependent on your partner, and that is your root form of happiness. So you do lose yourself. I don't think that's a healthy dynamic in any case. And I don't think that has to be a default dynamic that you fall into when you're in a relationship. You can fall into it, but I think you only fall into it if you haven't done the self-work. I think also another really crucial point to make is that after you end that relationship and you are fearful that you won't meet someone else, I would tell yourself this: become the person that someone else would want to date. Become that person. Because truthfully, you are going to be putting yourself out there on the dating market again. You want to sell yourself. You want to pitch yourself. How can we accentuate all your most positive qualities, right? If you're someone who is not that confident in himself, it's a great indication that that's the work that needs to require. And everyone can increase their confidence in different ways. But it's all about increasing self-love. And I'm a massive believer of being disciplined, because discipline is the best way of increasing your self-love, because you're keeping promises to yourself despite, it being uncomfortable in the short term. I will say this: I was in a relationship a few years ago. I actually mentioned it on the podcast. It was one of those kind of lockdown relationships, right? And I've got to relate to you. I felt like I was losing quite a bit of me. I was walking on eggshells. Massive red flag, by the way. If you ever feel like you're walking on eggshells and you can't speak your mind, that is a massive problem.
Yeah.
You have to actually address it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it was really, really unfortunate. But I remember I'd made up my mind for 2-3 weeks, and I was being a little bit of a coward. And the reason I'm using the term coward is because I know I could have ended it earlier, but I let it drag on because I was so scared of two things: how they would react, and also for my own selfish reasons at the time, which were, it was that. It was the selfish reasons and just being fearful of how they would respond. But I knew deep down it was the right decision to make. And one morning I was getting a coffee. I was listening to a podcast in my car. I think it was the Rob Dial Mindset Mentor podcast. Had a huge craze about him back a few years ago. And he was summarizing this study on happiness that the Harvard Business School did. I think like 30-40 years ago. It's the biggest longitudinal study ever conducted. Incredibly expensive, like thousands of participants or hundreds. And the biggest predictor of happiness, I'm going to get you to guess it. What is it?
I think being happy with yourself and being content with yourself, regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not. If you're happy and content with yourself, then
It wasn't. It wasn't that.
No?
But it's close. It was relationships. So the
Okay.
whole idea was based on the fact that,
well, it could be a relationship
Yeah.
with yourself.
no, it was relationships with other people, but not just romantic relationships. And I thought, great. Like, you know what I mean? That means, you go back to your selfish kind of inner voice, which is telling you, well, why would I want to end this relationship even though I'm not super happy? Because relationships must be the biggest predictor of happiness. And then as I was drinking my coffee arrogantly driving across the road, he did mention there was a caveat in the study, which is people who are single report higher levels of life satisfaction and happiness relative to those people who are in unhappy relationships. That was massive for me. That was fucking massive for me because I really didn't need to hear it as confirmation from a podcast. But truthfully, it did the job because that day I realized enough is enough. And I grew my balls. I grew some balls and I ended it, right? And it was difficult. It was everything I expected. It was very difficult on that person and I felt terrible for doing it. But deep down, I knew it was going to be the best thing for myself and for that person. And, there was no bad blood or anything like that. However, it was something that I knew had to be done. And it was a matter of just getting comfortable with that uncertainty. And I knew from the get-go, my first thing I had to do was just increase my self-esteem. Because that's something I had lost in that period of 8 months that I was with that person.
Yeah, and that's something that takes time as well. And that's why you can't put a time frame on the post-breakup era. How long do I need to be in that era before moving on? You'll go at your own pace, whatever that needs to be. Hopefully you're surrounded by good people to support you on that journey as well, because I do feel like that can speed it up as well. You and I are very lucky that we've got that. We've got close friends around us that were really supportive of our decisions. And links to my next point being really supportive of our decision before even making the decision as well, because that can be something that can actually help you with making that decision. Because we've spoken about how hard it is to make that decision to end it. You want to do it, you don't know how to do it. There are still thoughts in your mind where you're thinking, should I, shouldn't I? One tip that you absolutely should employ is to actually talk to those close friends about the decision, or a family member if you feel comfortable doing so, because that can not only reaffirm the beliefs that you're having, but it can also give you some insight into maybe things that they have picked up on that you might not have seen. An outsider perspective, they might see how you've been interacting with your partner or how you've changed as a person perhaps as well. And those things from your friends, from your nearest and dearest, can reaffirm the beliefs going forward when you actually make the decision to end it. So get yourself around your friends, not only after the breakup, but before it.
Okay, you've made the decision. You're going to do it. How do we execute this?
Nicely. How do we execute it nicely too, hey? Because that's important. You need to know your reasons going into it and be firm with those reasons. Expect your partner to be questioning you, to potentially wanting to not end it, potentially being caught off guard, but you need to be really firm in your decisions when you're delivering them to your partner, doing it so with, a courteous behavior and being nice and kind, but still stay firm, because they will say things that might catch you off guard, that, might play with your emotions. You're still in love with this person probably when you're making this decision. So love has this crazy ability to override a lot of things as well. So you need to stay rational in this moment. You need to be firm on your beliefs. So know what your beliefs are and deliver them with care, but with direction.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tell me, I know it's going to sound like a stupid question, but I've always been of the belief that you should break up with the person in the day, not the evening. What would you say about that?
For me, I think that is plausible. I think at night, emotions are running high. It's also maybe going to be getting later into the evening. You're potentially tired. Things have happened during the day. Emotions are crazy at this point. Feelings are going back and forth. Choosing time of day and choosing location is very important. I would say do it during the day. Do it like outside if possible as well. Like, you know, maybe you could be like in a park or like in an environment that allows you to think a bit clearly. Sometimes being stuck in your room can be risky for a couple of reasons. And especially if at night as well, it can be risky for the reason of potentially wanting to be romantic with each other for the final time. You know, if you are ending things, you know, we've heard about breakup sex before, and we've heard some people loving it, and we've heard some people advocating for it. I'm massively against it, and it is something that I think is shocking to do with your partner upon breaking up with them. And I think it's disrespectful to the both of you. And I also think it shows that there's a lack of self-worth in you making the decision to break up with them, because you're still essentially putting out for them romantically after delivering a whole bunch of reasons as to why you don't want to be with them, yet you're still then becoming vulnerable to them in the most vulnerable format, which is through having sex with them, especially after this, when emotions are probably higher than they've ever been, and you know, thoughts and perspectives are running riot. So I think it is absolutely shocking for you to do, not just for yourself, but for your partner as well.
It's a bit manipulative as well, I'd say.
Manipulative, it's selfish, and it can leave you both having a lot of questions afterwards and whilst doing it. And I just think it's a bit of a disgusting thing to do as well. I just don't, you know, morally and ethically, I think it's a bit disgusting. Like, you know, if you've actually broken up with them in a nice way, in a civil way, in a firm way, you also look like, as a guy, I think you look really weak if you're putting out for something like that after being so firm in your decision to end things. I think you look quite weak as a person afterwards.
What are your thoughts on establishing some boundaries ASAP as you've ended this relationship, and boundaries when it comes to that transition from intimate partners to, you know, strangers potentially?
Has to happen. And if that means no contact, so be it. I think it's healthy, and I think there's something in the whole mantra of out of sight, out of mind that rings true. It allows you both to move on naturally, and in order to move on naturally, you need to be able to move on without seeing each other, without messaging each other, without looking at each other's Instagram stories potentially. And for me personally, started off with, you know, we still were, you know, following each other on Instagram. That ended a couple months afterwards. I found out that I was no longer able to see profile and stories, and that's fine. That's completely fine. And if that means that it enables the person to move on faster, massively, I would massively encourage that and advocate for it. I don't think it's rude in any way. I think it is healthy for the person to move on. And yeah, like, would it hurt your feelings potentially? It might. For me, nah, it was fine. I felt completely fine about it. But you know what? It might be a tough pill for some people to swallow, but you need to understand that it's important to happen. So I think, you know, don't be fearful of no contact, and really know where you're at with your partner when you're ending it, or now your ex-partner when you're ending it, when it comes to these boundaries and these communication boundaries, because there's nothing worse than potentially thinking that stones have been left unturned and thinking that there is still confusion about how to go forward from here on in. You want to know what your boundaries are when you've ended it, just so that you've both got for yourself the respect for one another and the confidence going forward that, okay, I know where I'm at with this person, and I know that I can happily go about my way, and they can happily go about their way too, confidently, without the thoughts and doubts of, okay, I actually am unsure of where I am with them right now. You need to be confident about where you are going forward.
All of this may sound incredibly daunting for a listener who might be contemplating that breakup that they know they need to pursue. They've listened to you give a few bits of advice here on how to execute this in the most effective and painless way possible. And it might be quite a bit too much for that person to kind of listen to. I would say in response, I would add to that in life you're going to have difficult circumstances regardless. It's a massive theme of our show to sacrifice short-term happiness and pleasure and comfort for long-term happiness, fulfillment, and success in whatever domain you pursue. It's going to be hard regardless. And by you not ending that relationship that you know you should, you are delaying the inevitable. You not ending it now gives you a year that is lost. It's a year full of more pain, full of more emotional ups and downs. It's going to be even more difficult as time goes by. If you know they're not the one, and when I say you know, you'll know. Pursue it. Rather end it. But pursue the decision to end it, because the alternative is always worse.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be with someone that isn't that you're not happy with. I'm a true believer that relationships should feel easy. Love should feel easy. It should be fun. It should be easygoing. You should be each other's best friends. You shouldn't be walking on eggshells like we spoke about earlier, because that is the worst thing that you could have in a relationship or even a friendship. Yes, there's going to be ups and downs, but you want that 90% of the time to be up. If you find yourself in a consistent battle of trying to please the person and trying to say the right things, and you find yourself actually just dreading to see them, or you're rather apprehensive to see them, and you're scared about what you're meant to say and not say around them, that's the worst thing. And that's recipe for, okay, I'm actually probably not with the right person, and things need to give and need to change. But, like you said, it's about choosing the hard decision, and, the hard decision will probably be to end it. But I think it's worse for you to always stay. It'll always be worse for you to stay when you know you need to end it. But I think it gets easier with knowing that emotional pain is inevitable. It will always be there for you and for them, and you can't avoid it. It's unavoidable. So accept it, crack on, and do it, and get yourself the support and the love afterwards that you know you deserve and need, and surround yourself with those good people around you. Go to the gym, crack on, be the person that you want to be, and be the person that you would want to date as well. Because that is key to eventually finding someone that is well suited for you, and that will fulfill the person that you deserve to be with.
I think that's an excellent closing message, Jeremy. On that note, this has been episode 51 of the Big Bros podcast. I really, really, really hope that this episode has given a lot of value for that person who is contemplating that decision. I know that listening to a podcast a few years ago did that job for me, and I'm praying that it does for you. Even if you're not in that position, but you have a friend that's in that position, share it with them. I think it will do a lot of good for them.
Absolutely. It could change their day. It could change their feeling going forward, and give them the confidence that they're looking for. So absolutely encourage them to share it. Like this if you really do enjoy it, and reach out to us. As we say, our DMs are always open. If you've got questions, if you're feeling a bit apprehensive about this topic and fearful of this topic, reach out to us, because we're the bros who've been there after all. And if our little piece of perspective can do good for you, hopefully, in moving forward, then that's the best thing that we could ask for.
Amazing. On that note, guys, have a excellent and happy Tuesday. Lots of love as always. See ya.
Bye.